Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ivette Rodriguez. I am the co-founder of La Collab, and I'm excited to be here with you today to talk to Stephen Garza, a Latinx Gen Z activist and community organizer from Texas, the subject of the Sundance winning documentary Boy State, and Joaquin Castro, who represents San Antonio in the U.S. House of Representatives and also sits on important committees such as the House Intelligence Committee, the Education Committee, Labor Committee, Vice Chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, among many other hats. He's also the chair of the Texas Democratic Caucus, a state turning purple, and equally importantly has been leading coalition building in Washington with the Black Caucus and the Asian Pacific American Caucus on issues of representation, equity, and inclusion in Hollywood, education, and all American institutions. Welcome, gentlemen. So I've been talking about Boy State since I saw the film many months ago. Frankly, I was reeling from everything that has been happening in this country and the disproportionate way that our Latino community on the front lines that keep America running were being impacted by COVID-19 and the divisive and toxic rhetoric aimed to divide Americans. The police violence, racial injustice against Latinos and Blacks, I started to feel hopeless. But to my delight, hope came to me via watching the film Boy State. I was inspired and hopeful that Generation Z and young millennials will course correct our nation's democracy, and that I may be watching a future American president in the making in Stephen Garza. A bunch of us have already signed up to join his campaign team, so whenever you're ready, Stephen, give us a call. In the film, I watched Stephen navigate over 1,000 17-year-old boys, mostly white, in a mock election to form a mock government. Stephen did so with intelligence, kindness, genuineness, conviction, and a steady preciseness. One by one, he changed the hearts and minds of these boys, crossing lines of race, class, and party to find and reach a consensus. Adults, listen up. We have a lot of learning to do here. Stephen reminded me of two Latino leaders, American icon Cesar Chavez and Congressman Joaquin Castro, who I've known for over a decade and have watched him take on issues of importance to our Latino community with grace, integrity, conviction, and passion. You both make me so very proud, and I'm so excited that you finally get to meet here today. So, gentlemen, the stakes are high. The issues facing our community are too many. There are 32 million eligible Latino voters, and 75% of them are Gen Z and millennials, whom we must mobilize to vote. Let me start with you, Stephen. I know you're passionate about gun reform, getting out the vote for Wendy Davis's campaign in Texas. Did your experience at Boy State push you further into pursuing a career in politics, or was this always in the plan?
Absolutely. It played a huge role in making sure that I was to continue the path that I'm currently on. It is a huge thing to be thrown in this crucible where you're in the racial and political minority from the get-go. The odds are stacked against me and against other people who look like me, and it deters them from seeking the highest office in the program, which is governor. I didn't want that to happen to myself. I felt that I'd had to set an example for my fellow statesmen there that were in that racial and political minority to run themselves for a position at Boy State. Getting there and actually forming a coalition, like you said, of people who didn't necessarily agree with me or look like me or come from the same background as I did, but truly wanted to work together with me across ideological and party lines to actually get something done for the state of Texas and our country was very inspiring. And I take that enthusiasm that I had there 2 years on into the work that I'm doing right now for Wendy Davis here in Texas 21st Congressional District.
Thank you. And Joaquin, what pushed you to get into politics, and what advice would you give Stephen here?
Yeah, well, first, it's great to be with you, Yvette, and also with Stephen. And that was a riveting documentary to watch the dynamics of politics play out among all of those young men in the documentary at Boy State, and how you go about trying to win people over, and then the criticism that you sustain, and also the racism at times that you've got to put up with, and then to persevere as a young candidate through all of that. It gives me a lot of hope about the next generation, and especially as we've looked over the past 6 months or so at all of the social activism and all in the 6 months and actually beyond that, the next generation and how involved it's been on the issue of gun reform, with Black Lives Matter, and reforming our criminal justice system, and all of these issues that matter so much to Americans. The younger generation, I think, really is going to help bring about a lot of change in this country. And in terms of getting into politics, and thank you, Stephen, for helping Wendy there in that district, Texas 21. In terms of getting into politics, I think that you've just got to believe in yourself and surround yourself with people that believe in you, and then also be willing to take that leap. Sometimes it never feels like there's a perfect time to do it. There are people that will convince you that you're too young or that your moment passed or whatever it may be, but you've just got to believe in yourself and go out there and do it.
Thank you. Stephen, what do you think your generation, I know right now you're going through virtual learning as well, and what is the experience of your generation right this moment, and how is it that we should be talking to this generation to get them to get out and vote? What are the issues that are going to get them to the polls?
I think you have to make the case to young people that their futures are at stake in this election, even though it is two older candidates that are seeking the presidency. They're not only people on the ballot this year. Of course, your congressman is on the ballot, your senator here in Texas is on the ballot, local races that are really going to affect you the most in terms of where your kids go to school, where you're going to go to school, what laws are in place to make sure that you're treated equally in the place you're going to school with. And I think it's making the case to them that they need to participate in this political process that we have. It's not optional anymore, I think. I think my generation, young people in general, have gotten all the flack in the recent years for not coming out to vote. But they feel that it's pointless. They feel that it doesn't matter who they vote for, that it's a foregone conclusion. And that comes from, currently a president who had lost a popular vote, but still carried the presidency and has led us to the 4 years that we're in right now. It comes from the fact that there's hypocrisy in one party when they say that, no, we should nominate a Supreme Court justice in an election year, and then 4 years later do the exact same thing that they said they shouldn't do. If they feel hopeless, they feel like there's no point in them. They can't afford to go to school. They can't afford to be a homeowner. They're having to work 2 or 3 jobs to be able to put food on the table for themselves and pay rent and to be able to get themselves through education, even if they're able to pursue a college degree. All of them say they don't have time for politics. And the sad thing about that is politics is the reason why they're in that situation in the first place. I think we need to make a strong case that, this election is a referendum on the job that the president has done in the past 4 years and his party has done in the past 4 years to make, did it make our lives better? And it didn't. Young people, college people like myself, were left out of the stimulus package. None of us received any kind of help, to pay for rent or for food when all of our lives were thrown in upheaval, when I had to go from Houston to El Paso to move my stuff out in, a short amount of time, and do virtual learning, which is to some people may not be feasible. It's definitely telling them that you have to have a direct role in how your future is. The people in Washington right now who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s are making decisions that we're going to feel the effects of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. And we deserve to have a say in the future of our country. And that's the case that we need to make to young people, not here just only in Texas, but all across the country.
Joaquin?
And I think that that's a great reminder that the voice of young people is incredibly important. And, when you run as a young candidate for office, because I started running for office when I was 26, and my brother started probably when he was about 25. There are a lot of people that tell you or make you feel as though your perspective or your opinion and your experiences don't matter as much because you're not 50 or 60 or 70 years old. But I want young people to realize that their voice is incredibly important and essential, in fact. And it's remarkable to me that in the U.S. Congress, I think that at the beginning of this term, there were maybe 2 that I know for sure, maybe 3 people that were under 30 years old in the United States Congress, even though that segment of the population, right, let's just say between 18 and 30, is a large segment of the American population. And I had been heartened by the fact that if you look at the surveys and polls lately, it shows that a larger percentage of young people than usual, in other words, than we ordinarily see every presidential election, have said that they're anxious to vote, that they're excited to vote. But I also think that it's a warning for politicians who are in power, which is if young people are going to pour their heart into marching in the street or protesting or even going out to vote, they expect for you to deliver afterward on the things that they fought so hard for. And so in the past, I feel as though there's been rounds of activism that have never been met with the kind of change that activism and that energy was intended to accomplish. And I hope that this time things will be different.
Thank you. So we know that there are 32 million eligible Latino voters, and 75% of them are Gen Z and millennials. How exactly, knowing all of this and knowing what we witnessed during Boy State, the film, what's the message though? Because we do have polls that say that they're not as enthusiastic about getting out there. So how do we speak to them, and where are they? Because it doesn't seem like our party is directly in communication with some of them in terms of some polls that just came through from Voto Latino. I was just wondering, and Stephen, I look at you, like, how do we get this message across? Like, what is your opinion? What is the best way of getting this message across?
I think it's investing in these communities, not only politically, but when you're actually governing, really help them out. Here in Texas, which is becoming a very purple state, that I think has a very good chance of flipping if people put resources into our state. And I know that the Joe Biden campaign has decided to put some $6 million into the state of Texas, which is leaps and bounds more than we thought we were going to get, which is really going to help us out. But it's the fact that electorally, you don't need Texas to win the presidency. It would be a emphatic cherry on top of a Donald Trump loss if Biden carried the state of Texas. But electoral math-wise, you don't need it. And you could, the amount of money it costs to invest in Texas, you could put elsewhere. And that's the way consultants view it, as there's no point in why, we don't have to win Texas. We need to win these 3 states, which we can spend the money we're spending on Texas in these 3 states. And therefore, people feel like they're not involved. They feel that nobody's coming to Texas. Nobody's, really trying to reach out and speak to them. It's disheartening for them, and they've kind of experienced that growing up here in the United States, hearing my mom and my grandparents talk about politics in Mexico, that it never really felt like anybody was really standing up for them. Here in the US, it does feel the same way to them. They don't feel that they have a representative. They don't feel that their local leaders are representative of who they are. They don't feel that the Congress makeup is reflective of the diversity of our state and our country. They don't feel that the presidency is reflective of who they are and the backgrounds that they come from. It's very tough to say what can be done to reach out to them. They're a very diverse set of people, and you're looking at the polls, and I don't think the polls should be where they are. I think that the actions of the current administration should emphatically make Hispanics want to be more involved and to be energized to vote for a better future for themselves. And it's, I think, just not investing enough in political campaigns and in political capital in government, making strides to really reach out to them. And if we're not doing that, then someone else will, and they'll go to whatever side they feel is actually trying to make their lives better.
Well, and there is this vicious cycle that happens with a lot of young people who are potential voters, and even among a lot of Latinos who are not consistent voters. And that cycle is that campaigns, because they're on limited time and resources, they tend to target consistent voters, people that have already gone out to vote before, 2 times, 3 times before. And so what happens is that if you're a young person who's never voted before, or if you're a Latino or Latina who hasn't voted before, or maybe the last time you voted was 10 years ago, a lot of times you're not going to get the door knocks, and you're not going to get the mailers, and you're not going to get the phone calls from folks asking you to go vote. Now, as Stephen mentioned, that's changing some in Texas because there are more resources that are coming into our state now. But for years and years in Latino communities in Texas and a lot of other places across the country, people were just not being approached, including a lot of our young people, and asked to go vote. And what happens is, at least the phenomenon that I've seen with a lot of young Latinos and others, even Latinas that may be 63 years old but aren't consistent voters, is that their mindset, they're often criticized because people say, well, you're not voting, so you don't care, and you're basically an irresponsible citizen. I actually think for a lot of people that's not true. It's something else. There's more of a philosophy that they do care. They want to see that voting is going to matter and make a difference. But there's also something like a concern that's more fundamental to them than that, which is because they're not getting all of the information that they need to make an informed decision. They feel like they don't have the information they need and they don't want to make the wrong choice by voting for a candidate. In other words, they don't have enough information about the candidates, so they feel like they don't want to do any harm. I'm not going to go vote because I don't know what these people stand for, and I don't want to make things worse by choosing the wrong person. And to be quite honest with you, there have been times in my life where on some obscure race, even as informed as I am, about the candidates and the parties and so forth, where I'll look at two people's names on a ballot and I have not heard a thing about either one of them, and I leave the race blank because I don't want to choose the wrong person. And I think that phenomenon is happening over and over on a larger scale with a lot of people.
And I find it interesting that I'm getting phone calls from my friends, from my non-Latino friends in Hollywood asking me about what's happening with the Latino vote and why is it that, and this and that, and they're concerned. And I find that, that these are like token efforts across the board, across society, right? Like now everybody hands on deck looking at this election, and now, the Latino cohort being so important, it's like a little bit too late. I think across the board, yes, we're going to talk about this election coming up, but in general, our nation and every single, organization across this country needs to understand the importance of the Latino cohort, the voter, the consumer. I find that to be interesting as we're sitting here celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, and it's what I like to call Hispanic Hysterical Month because it's just nonstop, and then on the 15th, silence. So yeah. What do you say about that? Because I just want to take an opportunity to talk about the whole entire, issue and not just the voting.
Yeah, no, I think that, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of focus around this time on Latinos, on Hispanics, and our heritage. But I'll tell you, as you know, as chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, we have done a lot of work on diversity and inclusion of Latinos in different industries over the past few years. And it's become clear to me that there is a large percentage of the American population, a large percentage, that really does not understand who the Latino community is and where we fit into the history of the country. I've told this story to other folks, but we were on a Zoom call with one of the CEOs of a top 5 publishing company. And I asked this gentleman if he could name 3 Latinos or Latinas who had made significant contributions to American history. And he thought about it for a few seconds, and he finally said, no, I can't. And he wasn't being rude or dismissive. The man just could not think of 3 historical figures. But we've been written out of a lot of history textbooks and American history, state textbooks. And so what happens is not only do our own generation of young people over the years not have an appreciation for the contributions of the people from their heritage and their background and their community, but the larger American society also gets no sense in their own schooling about where anybody from the Latino community has made an important contribution to the country. And that leaves a community very vulnerable to the stereotypes that we have to deal with in American society. And in many ways, when you combine that with the dangerous political rhetoric of the president and others over the years who refer to immigrants, for example, from Mexico as rapists and criminals, it creates a very dangerous mix for Latinos. And we've seen hate crimes over the years, the last few years, spike up against Latinos and other groups as well.
Stephen?
I agree 100%. Growing up, as 19 years old, I just graduated from public high school in 2019, and you don't get to learn about these movements that happened in the past 30, 40, 50 years to gain more rights for Hispanics. I had the privilege of attending the University of Texas at El Paso for a year last year, and I had arrived about 2 weeks after the El Paso massacre, and there was essentially a terrorist attack on this community that should have rallied the country around the Hispanic community, that somebody had gone through so much trouble and length to just specifically target this community, buried in this mountainous area that's so beautiful, and going there and seeing El Paso strong everywhere, and not it just being a slogan, but a way of life, that they were really neighbors with one another. And even if you didn't know each other, you felt that connection there. It was such an honor to be there for a year. And I did an event with Ivette commemorating the 1-year anniversary of the attack. And it was really silence all across social media on this horrific event that took place that seemed to, have been pushed out of the national memory so fast. And combining with that, with the fact that in school you don't learn about these heroes, I actually just 2 days ago walked past the Cesar Chavez statue here on UT campus and was so mesmerized by it. I stood there for a few seconds just admiring it. I took a picture of it and saved it for my camera. And it's just like, man, I bet I could get 100 people on this campus here and ask them, tell me who this is, and they wouldn't be able to say who it is. It's tough, it's sad, and that's why Hispanics feel that they don't have a place in this country, that they feel that they're left out, that it's two different worlds of cultures and history here. And they feel that they shouldn't vote, they can't vote in a country that doesn't feel that appreciates them, that recognizes them, that at the highest levels of government are demonized and are being actively worked against. When you see, the family separation and the camps happening here in the state, it's troubling, it's sad, and it's demoralizing. And the thing is, that's what they're aiming for. That's what they want to do, to make sure that this community does not come out in droves to vote, because they know if they do, then the future of this state and this country is going to change rapidly in a more progressive way.
And that's one of the reasons we founded La Collab, was really because of that, because of El Paso, and because of our brown babies in cages, and how people were, we thought for sure that moms from all over the country were gonna rally, and for some reason Latino community is being erased. And so therefore that's one of the reasons that La Collab came to be, and specifically looking to Hollywood, to the media, to entertainment, that's perpetuating an image of who we are. When I saw Steven Garza and Renee Otero on Sunday on the film Boy State, it's like, that's our country. Those are American Latinos. They're across this country. Tell their stories. There are so many beautiful stories, 60 million plus American Latino stories to be told. And for some reason, they want to perpetuate this negative image of us. And so I think it's so important, all the work that everyone is doing.
Yeah, thank you for all of that work. And it has been a long time in coming in getting Hollywood to recognize the importance of Latinos, to open the door for Latinos and Latinas in terms of representation at every level and different positions, and also in terms of portrayal, so that you're not just the same few 2 or 3 stereotypes, but that you've got characters and stories that are, full-fledged people, right? Like the kind, I grew up on the west side of San Antonio, which is probably 95% Mexican-American in some of the parts where I grew up. And it's regular people that are living full lives. They're not like cardboard characters of just a drug dealer or a gang member, but you hardly see Latino characters in their fullness, even now. It's getting better, but we've still got quite a ways to go.
Before I go towards the end of this conversation, I did want to bring up both of you. You're both Texans. You both grew up in Texas, and you both have strong relationships with your moms, who I know are inspirations to you. And I know, like Congressman Castro, your mom has been fighting for the working Latino family her entire life, and you grew up, and I know how proud your mom is. Even in the film, you called, the first person you called when you lost was your mom, and it was just one of the most beautiful parts of just to show the humanity of what our relationships are. And then to see her come to Sundance, where your film premiered and where you won the grand jury award, like, both of your moms must be so proud of both of you. Can you talk a little bit about them?
Yeah, Stephen.
Thank you. Yeah, she came over from Mexico and was undocumented for a time. And she really just wanted to have a better life for her and her kids. It was tough growing up, with a single mother who had to raise 3 kids. We would live with my abuelita in her, 2-bedroom apartment, and all of us would be in one room, and she would be in her room, my grandmother. And it was tough because my mom had to work 2 or 3 jobs to just provide for us and be on the table, put food on the table. There could be strides of days where I wouldn't see her because when I would wake up to get on the bus in the morning, she'd be getting what little sleep she could, and by the time I came home, she'd already be starting her second job somewhere. It was really gut-wrenching to see her come home with her eyes bloodshot, barely able to walk, needing help to get into bed, having all this pain of being on her knees, cleaning, working really hard. And I knew at a young age that it was to me, to use this opportunity of being here in Texas and the United States to not only make something of myself, but to help people like my mom who didn't have time to be involved in politics and didn't have time to really organize in their community and be able to represent them. It's a huge honor to be in the position that I'm in. It's a huge responsibility for me to be able to represent the Hispanic community throughout promoting Boy State. And as you see in the film, she was the first person I called, and it was very emotional. It was an amazing feeling to take her to Sundance, which actually happened in January this year when we were still in person, which feels like a lifetime ago. And she cried and I cried, and at the post Q&A panel with the audience, I was still pretty emotional, and the only words I got out were "Hi, Mom," and the entire audience of 500 stood up and gave her a standing ovation for being my mother and raising me, which was amazing. And it's probably the best day of my life to be able to give that to her, to show that appreciation for her, that all of her hard work, all the 35 years that she's been working nonstop, was for something, and that hopefully in the future I'm able to provide for her and make sure that she never ever has to work a day in her life again. So our moms, I guess Congressman, how much they mean to us, and especially growing up Hispanic, how much they may be strict, they may be tough, but it's a 100% out of love and care for you.
And what a beautiful story also in your relationship. And there is so much sacrifice by parents and grandparents in the Latino community for their kids and their grandkids. It was wonderful to see that the ending, and then to hear your story about what happened at Sundance. And my mom was a hellraiser, and still is actually, because my grandmother had come to Texas from Coahuila, Mexico in 1922 as an orphan. And at the time that my grandmother came to Texas, there were still signs that said no dogs, Negroes, or Mexicans allowed in different Texas establishments. And so my mom, who was born in 1947, bona fide baby boomer, she grew up at a time where if you spoke Spanish in school in Texas, you got spanked, you got punished for speaking a language. So you had a community that had a language beaten out of it. We have a lot of debates amongst ourselves as Latinos now about why people don't speak Spanish, or you should speak Spanish. And it's a wonderful thing to speak Spanish. But I think missing is some of that history that in places like Texas, they literally beat it out of a generation of people. And so my mom, experiences like that, and how she saw my grandmother treated. My grandmother worked 2 or 3 jobs at a time, also scrubbing floors and waiting tables and washing clothes. That inspired my mom to get active in the 1960s and 70s in the Chicano movement, the Mexican-American civil rights movement in Texas. And she's been at it ever since. She has stayed involved in issues with domestic violence and public libraries and helping different candidate campaigns over the years. And if I had not grown up with my mom and my dad, my parents were together till I was 8, and they were both involved in grassroots politics. But if I hadn't grown up in that household, I don't know that I would have ever run for office myself or been inspired to run for office. But I'm very grateful that she did everything for us that she could, and everything for others, and that has been a big part of my inspiration to be involved in public service.
Amazing. Latina moms, they're the best. So a few things as we close this out that I would love for you to talk about. The census deadline was just extended to 10/31. Congressman Castro, I definitely would like you to speak to why it's so important that our community fill out the forms. And also, just besides voting, obviously we have to vote. What other ways would you say that we can stay connected and civically engaged? How do we get more involved?
Well, it's absolutely essential that everybody fill out the census. And if you haven't completed it now, you probably have gotten a notice at your door. Please call that number or go onto the website and fill it out, because every 10 years, Latinos are one of the groups that tend to be woefully undercounted. And I hope that this year will mark an improvement in that. But it matters because that's how the federal government determines how much money communities get for all sorts of things, for our schools, for people's kids, for healthcare, for the roads and highways that are built, anything that involves what's called formula funding from Congress. Usually you're looking at population by census tracts. So please go and fill it out. It also determines how many representation in state legislatures, in Congress, and city councils, and so forth. So if people don't fill it out, then Latino neighborhoods and communities are less likely to be well represented in all of those branches of government. And so it has huge consequences. It's not just, kind of like just a piece of paper that doesn't matter. It makes a big difference. I hope people will do it. And then in terms of staying involved, there are a million ways that folks can be involved now. If you have time to help one of the campaigns that inspires you here before Election Day, that would be wonderful. But there are also a lot of different civic organizations for whatever your passion is, whether it's politics or human rights or animals, whatever it is, for you to get involved. And I hope that you will.
100%. And I think for more younger people, it's kind of little things that go a long way. It's reading your local paper and make sure that you're not just glossing over what's happening in the presidential election or what happened in the debates, but see what's happening in your city, what your budget is for the year, what kind of propositions are going to be on the ballot this year. Make sure you have a voting guide so that you can make an informed decision on what's going to be on your ballot this November. Vote early if you can. The lines are going to be as long as early voting. If you need to vote by mail, make sure you follow all the requirements made there. It's unfortunate that with the governor's recent decision to limit drop-off mail ballots to 1 per county, I just posted a graphic on my social media that showed one county in Texas with about 600 population have 1 place to drop off a ballot, and Harris County, which has 4.7 million people, has 1. And I think their goal is to make you not vote, is to break your spirit, to have your voice heard in this election. Taking strides and making a plan to vote, make sure that you bring your voter guide, make sure that you're making an informed decision can go a long way, and making sure that you show the powers that don't want you to vote, that they're not going to intimidate you, that you'll wait in line, you'll do whatever it takes to make sure that your voice is heard in this most monumental and the most important election in modern history.
Thank you. I am the product of the American promise, and I come from a working class Latino family, so I know that it exists, and so our democracy is on the ballot. And so please vote. Everyone go out and vote early. And thank you so much, Congressman Castro, for joining us, and Stephen Garza. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to meet you, Congressman.
Great to meet you. Good to see you all.
Thank you.